Hello everyone. If you watched my last video, you saw how to build a simple client for continuous polling of a server. What I'm going to do tonight is build on that video, and I'm going to improve on the method of polling that's being done to get messages from the server. So to recap super quickly, what I have here is a server that has two routes set up in it, a post route and a get route. And clients that are connected to this server can post a message to it, and they can also repeatedly call this get route to get all the messages that have been posted to the server. So I recommend you go back and watch the last video or the one before it if you don't know exactly what's going on here, because this certainly builds off of those. Okay, so I'm going to run my server right now. And with it running, I'm going to go and visit it at localhost 5000. Here's my server, and I'm going to just open up my console window over here on the right hand side. I think there we go. And the way I have it configured right now, the client is actually initiating an XML HTTP or AJAX request to the server once per second to make sure that there are no messages being posted by other clients that might be connecting and sending those requests. And there isn't anything else going on right now. Nobody else is talking to this server. If I were to open up another window in Chrome and also visit the very same server, and I mentioned before in another video, and I'll say again, this could very well just be on another computer on your same network, and I were to type something here, then I would immediately post that to the server. And within 1 second, this client would get the update simply because it's asking once per second, hey, are there any new messages? Hey, are there any new messages? Hey, are there any new messages? And that's what we've got. Okay, so starting from this point, I want to improve on this a little bit. There are some problems with doing this type of continuous polling. One of them is that if the server goes down, so let me go and quit my server, the client will keep, see that? The client will keep on generating these requests. And these are all now hung requests. We're not getting any response back. And this is a very nasty thing to do to your client. Plus, we're generating network traffic when there really isn't any reason to do that. All right, now one thing that we could do is we could just simply not poll every second like we have been doing in my JavaScript. I have the ability to control how often I want the client to send the GET request. That's here. Right, this is the sending, and here I'm just choosing this to happen every 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So I could, of course, fall back to some other longer interval if I wanted to. But you know, that doesn't really solve the nature of this problem as we see it. Right, by the way, these are still going on. I'm still generating additional requests that are just never coming back. Okay, so what do we do? Let's improve on this a little bit by changing the nature of the JavaScript. So instead of using set interval, what I'm going to do is change this function to set timeout. Set timeout, if you haven't seen it, is just a one-off timer. It happens only one time, as opposed to set interval, which is repetitive. So this will wait 1,000 milliseconds after we load the page, and then it will fire this function, get messages, and it will only do it once. Okay, so maybe 1,000 is shorter than it needs to be. Let's make it 3,000 milliseconds, okay? And let's go back and start the server. So here it is running. Let's go reload the client. I want you to watch. There won't be a request sent initially, but watch. 3 seconds later, there it is. You see it just popped up down here, okay? But that is it. There won't be any other requests from then on. Okay. So that represents a little bit of an improvement, right? But you can see now the only problem here is if the other person decides to put in something, let's say this person types in bar and hits send, this client we're back to this client never getting an update. Right, now, obviously, if this person puts in something like foo, then the client will get everything that's been in the array, but that's not what we want. We want an automatic update happening. But the problem, of course, is that I'm not triggering the AJAX request, the GET request, repeatedly anymore because I've gone to set timeout. Okay, so is there a way that we can bring back the repetitiveness at the same time controlling for all of this network traffic in situations where the server might be down? That's what we're interested in doing right now. How can we do that? So let me introduce you to this idea. So first off, what we could do is inside of our get messages function right here, I have an event listener listening for the load which is basically the load event is when the response comes back from the server. And that's where I basically take the content and draw it to the page. But there's nothing keeping me at this point from calling myself again. In other words, I could call get messages from within get messages. This is whenever we do something like this is a recursive type of architecture. Recursion is when you call a function from within that same function. And you got to be careful when you do that. You could actually end up using up all the memory in your stack. Well, I should say all the memory that's available for your browser to use. It's going to be okay in this case because we're only going to fire off another call to get messages when we successfully get an event back, a load event back. Okay, so this should trigger repetitively. Now, to make it just a little more interesting, I'm not just going to call get messages. I'm actually going to take and do another timeout. So I'll wait. So when I get a response back from the client, now again, I'm assuming, or from the server, sorry, I'm assuming a successful response comes back from the server. I'm going to draw the contents to the page, and then I'm going to wait another 3 seconds. And then I'm going to set timeout again. And, I'm going to set timeout, wait 3 seconds, and then get messages again. All right, and then we'll go back through the function, and when the response comes back from the server, then I'm right back where I started from. I'll wait 3 seconds, and then I'll call get messages again. And so this function is going to loop. It's going to keep calling itself recursively over and over again with a 3-second delay and potentially even longer between those calls, because this can't even happen until the request comes back. So if the request from the server, or until the response comes back, I'm sorry, I misspoke. If the response from the server never comes back, then this load event is never going to happen, and we're never going to get to here. Okay, so let's check this out in practice and see what happens. So I will refresh the server, client, sorry, and we'll wait a moment. There was my first load, and there, look, there's my next request and response. There's my next request and response. There's my next one. And there's my next one. They're happening every 3 seconds. But again, I'm not using set interval. I'm using set timeout once to get the process started, and then it's re-triggering itself on a 3-second delay if and only if the response comes back. Right? So it kind of looks like what we had before. We just have, request after request after request, only they're not happening once every second. They're happening once every 3 seconds, and potentially even a little bit longer because of that timing that's involved with actually sending out the request to the server and getting the response back, and all of that has to, because this has to trigger. Okay, but here's the benefit. Watch what happens now. I'm going to reload or refresh the page so there's not so much here. All right, so we'll come back. All right, here we go. Okay, there's our first one. Here comes our second one. Now I'm going to immediately go over here and I'm going to quit the server. Server goes down. Okay, come back and watch. There's the first failed timeout, or the first failed request. And now, nothing. Okay, so we've stopped sending because this is never happening again. This event listener is never detecting the load of the request, the first request that fails, this never happens, and we no longer set the timeout, and we no longer go and send the AJAX request to get messages, to get the new messages from the server. And so, good, okay? So now we're not using all that network traffic, and the browser is not spinning up request after request that are not being responded to. And that's the end. So I think that represents an improvement over what we had before. All right, now we can make it even a little bit better if we want to. And so I'm going to direct you to this particular page here on the Mozilla Developer Network site, where they just explain how to use timeout events in the browser. So a timeout is what happens when a request is made to a server and nothing ever comes back. And I don't know exactly how long. By default, Chrome will wait before it just gives up and it considers the request just dead. But there is some default time. But you can specify what you want that time to be by just setting the .timeout property on your XML HTTP request. And here you can see they're setting it to 2,000 milliseconds. So that means if you don't get anything back in 2,000 milliseconds, you're just going to give up. And this is not unlike what you do in life, right? When you're trying to get somebody's attention and you say their name a couple of times, and after a while, if you get no response, you just kind of give up and you go and you ask somebody else for what you need, right? That's a timeout event. And the other thing that you can do is when the browser actually decides, okay, the 2 seconds have passed, then this timeout event happens. And you actually get to supply a function to this property here. And you can do whatever you want inside that function. All right, so let's go through this, and I'm actually going to implement it in this client in the JavaScript to make things just a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is in here, after I open my AJAX request, I'm going to type in my xhr.timeout, and let's set this to be, let's give it, I don't know, let's give it 5 seconds to come back. That's long enough, I think. All right, now if it doesn't come back, so if the one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to pick up on the load event here, and this will have happened, and then we can go for another round, or we're going to time out. So let's write the event handler for the timeout. And the way that the Mozilla site suggests that you do it is you go like this: xhr.onTimeout, like that, equals function. You must specify an argument inside there. E is for error. But you might want to print that error message on the console, in other words. But you have to have something in there. And now inside here, we can put whatever we want to do if, in fact, there is a timeout. Now, I'm also wondering if it's possible, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering if it's possible to kind of keep this syntax and say, could we do something like xhr.add event listener? There we go. And have it actually listen for, I don't know that this is the right syntax, but could we have it listen for a timeout? Maybe. Yeah, it looks like that looks like something different. Listen for timeout. Let's see. Function. And then let's put our anonymous callback in here. Let's do an alert. Alert. You timed out. And I think we probably want to put the argument inside there. And then let's just let's get rid of this. Right. So I know that the other one will work. I'm curious to see if this one will work. And what's nice about that, if this does work, is it just kind of keeps the same structure that we have here. It's like saying, okay, look, if it works and the request goes through and we get a response, that's a load, and then do this. I want you to do this. If it doesn't work, if it times out, then we're going to do something else in here. I like that structure. I like it if it works that way. Let's see what happens. Okay, so yeah, we don't need to refresh the server. I'm going to restart actually I do need to restart the server because it was off. Okay, so let's open up the console and we can watch the network request coming through. It's great. That's good. Okay, let's go ahead and quit the server. Let's see what happens. Quit the server. Now it doesn't appear to work. In fact, it's still firing requests, which I don't like. Let's see what's going on here. Actually, before I do anything, I should look on my console. I do have some errors. Connection refused, connection refused. Let me refresh the page for a moment. Here, let's restart the server. This could be a dead end trying to do it this way, but let's see what happens. All right, so we're waiting. There's a response. Everything's coming back. Let's quit the server. Okay, my GET request failed. One error. Let's check my network here. See what's going on. Well, now it seems to be working. I wonder if I just forgot to save it. Right, I still don't have an alert though, so I don't like that. All right, well, it was worth a try. That's what you get when you just sort of try out code on the fly to see if it'll work. I'm kind of surprised it doesn't, but this may not be the right event exactly to put here. Let's see, add event listener timeout function E, because clearly I never got an alert. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of that. There might be a way to make that work. I'm not sure what to put there, but we'll just go back to the tried and true. So sometimes it's nice to just experiment, see what'll happen. All right, so this is the way you're supposed to do it. So here I'm just gonna say alert. You timed out, like that. Save this. Let's restart the server. Come back to the browser, refresh the page. All right, there's my first request. There's my next one. They're about 3 seconds apart. Let me go here and quit so that my request fails. My request fails. And this should time out right about now, but it's not doing it. So it's still not picking up on that. Okay. Let me pause for a minute and see what's going on. Okay, so I paused the video for a few minutes and I looked around for a bit and I found a really interesting post on Stack Overflow, which basically is, well, you can read it here, essentially saying that a connection timeout is essentially very different than what I'm receiving. I'm getting a connection refused, and I didn't actually look closely enough to see that. I probably should have noticed that, but because this column was so small, I didn't really pay attention. But if you just kind of scroll more, you can see error connection refused. So that's not the same thing as a timeout. So I'm actually going to try to simulate a timeout now, but we'll also talk about this type of error. And this post just really explains the difference between the two. And I think it's pretty clear. It basically says, look, you know, if you get a timeout, it's probably because there's a port blocked or some other issue with the host. The host is quote unquote off, whatever that means. But a connection refused means that the host is just not running a service that you're trying to connect to. And that's where we are. I mean, the host is here. The host is my computer. I'm just not running, when I shut the server down, I'm just not running that service anymore. So I am getting this connection refused. So that's a bit of a different error. And again, we probably have to control for that in this code as well. But while I was poking around, I also went and looked at the full document on the XML HTTP request, and I found the other things that you can listen for. And as it turns out, my guess was wrong. You can't listen for a timeout. And now I'm thinking about it, and it makes perfect sense, because a timeout is a browser-based thing anyway. You don't receive a timeout from the server, so it wouldn't really be an event that you'd listen for. But it's sort of it's a client's decision. Okay, the request is timed out. But these are specific errors or events that you can listen for in the client code. So obviously we're going to implement this in a few minutes to catch the error that we're receiving. But before we do that, I am going to try to simulate a timeout now that I've thought about it. And sometimes these things are hard to kind of like mull over when the video is running live. So what I'm going to do is go back and so first I will go back to my server, right? And I'm going to changed the code in my server to not respond. So I'm going to run the service. I'm going to have the server running, but I'm going to get rid of this. So I'm not going to send a response back. That will initiate. That will be a timeout. Okay, so now the client's going to wait a couple of seconds. Let's save that. All right, the client will wait. I think I had it set for set timeout is 5 seconds. So it's going to wait 5 seconds, and then when the timeout happens, it should throw up the alert. All right, so let's see if we can get a legitimate timeout event this time. Again, because the server is going to be running, it's just not going to be responding. All right, let's try it. So the server, here it goes, is running, okay, but incapable of sending a response. So back to my client, let's refresh the page. Okay, so we're waiting. Here comes the first request, 3 seconds, it's been made. Now 5 seconds. Why are we getting a response when the server is not responding? You know what? I think I know what I did. I think I changed it in the wrong place. Hang on. Let's go back to the code. Yes, look at what I did. I changed it in the post route. I changed the wrong thing. Okay, so it's here. This is what I want to get rid of, because that's the I'm sending to the get route to get the messages, and so that's the thing that I want to comment out. So I just commented out the wrong thing. Okay, saved. Let's quit the server. Let's restart the server. Server's running. Let's go back. All right, here we go. Let's refresh the page. Now it should work. So 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our alert. It timed out. Okay? All right, so that's cool. So we're catching timeouts now. Great. All right, and you see how that canceled appeared after I dismissed the alert box? Watch it again. There's request 1, Mississippi 2, Mississippi 3, Mississippi 4, Mississippi 5, Mississippi. There's the timeout. All right, now the whole thing is just being held because it's an alert. When I click to dismiss, it says cancel. Now if I got rid of the alert, it would just cancel immediately. So back to here. So let's not do the alert anymore. All right, let's not do anything, in fact. Let's just wait for it. Request, 5-second delay. Here comes a timeout right about now. Right, it just canceled right there. Okay, so that's great. We don't have the request hanging. We're catching timeouts. But now let's work on the other issue. Now let's work on catching the actual error we were getting back, which was a connection refused event that I was just not picking up on. So according to the documentation, we'll go back to here. We should be able to do this right here. Right here. So add event listener will listen for an error. See what happens. Let's see what it does. All right, so we'll say we got to change our variable, right? This has to be, we called it xhr.add event listener error. We don't actually have that function, so we're just going to make it anonymous. We're just going to say function. And for the time being, again, let's just use our trusty alert. Let's say alert. I'm sure I can put an error in there, and let's actually alert the error. Let's see what that does. All right, I think that argument is just made to go in there, and I'm pretty sure. So it doesn't exactly say that here, but again, it's, yeah, see how these functions are named down. It's named here, transfer failed, but then it's defined down here, and they kind of get an automatic something, an error or an event. All right, let's see what happens. Let's see what it logs if we just log that thing down here instead of the text. All right, save this. So actually what I'm going to do now is go back to my server code, go back over here to server, and I'm going to put the response back because there's no reason not to have it, but I'm actually not going to run the server. Okay, so just don't run it. Okay, let's see what happens. Yeah, it looks like it didn't actually alert anything. Let's see. I'm getting, yeah, no, I got the, let's see, we'll request the first. Here we go. Got nothing. I got the first connection didn't go, so here let's run it. That may be because the page didn't load. Of course, what am I saying? All right, so the page at least has to load. So with the server running, let's load the page. Let's get a request back. Okay, so it's every 3 seconds we're getting a request. Now let's quit. Quit the server. Let's see. Ah, there it is. There it is. Okay, object progress event. Interesting. So there's probably a lot of information in that event that we can look at. Let's go back and take a peek. So instead of alerting, let's do console.log and let's look at the contents of that message. And actually, it's not the error that it's giving me, it's the event itself. So it'd probably be better to make this EVT like they had it, because that's short for event. Usually when you see in JavaScript like this, when somebody passes just a plain old E in here as an argument, it's usually meant to stand for error. I mean, it doesn't matter what you put. You can use any letter that you want, but I think convention is to use E for error and EVT for event. And I had thought it was going to pass an error, but it's not. It's passing an event, the whole thing. So let's go with that. And so we'll console.log the event, and then we'll see if we can look inside, drill down. It's probably some JSON structure that we can look inside of to see what's in there. Let's see what we get. Okay. Let's restart the server, because again, as I made the silly mistake before, if the server is not running, we won't even get the page the first time. All right, there's the page. Let's quit and let's watch what happens. Okay, there was the connection refused. It should have logged it. Let's go over. Here it is, progress event. All right, and see this little disclosure triangle? You can click that to see more of what's going on, more information than you ever wanted. Let's see, type error, info, let's see, current target. There's more information here than you're probably interested in. Path, source element. Yeah, somewhere in here is more information that you might want to print, but I'm not really finding it. Let's see. Loaded 0, current target. I mean, you could go look through here and try to find the path to what it is to information that you're interested in, but nothing's jumping out at me right now. Ready state 4. That's important. Target, yeah. So all right, well, I'm not seeing any great information here, but this is, anyway, the information about the error is contained in here. I'm really just looking for the way that the browser knows to call this a connection failed event, because it says over here in the network, it says failed, error, connection refused. And so this is, I'm wondering if this is somehow coming back in the body of that here. It may be, let's see, it may simply be that, let's go look at this thing a little more carefully. What can I see? Network. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Request headers, let's see over here. So we've got response, failed to load response data, headers. All right, well, I'm not finding exactly the way that Chrome is knowing to call this a connection refused event as opposed to something else. It's really just out of interest that I was trying to find that. Is it in here? Where is it? Anyway. But the point is, I can certainly detect it, and I think that's what matters. So I now have a situation where I've got the way of picking up two different things. I can deal with my timeout, which is done here, and I can get rid of that code. Right? And I can deal with connection refused. All right. Now, I don't know what you want to do with those things, but if the connection is refused, you can do something like this. And maybe you just want to wait for a long time. So maybe instead of waiting, let's say 3 seconds to send the request, let's wait 6 seconds, right? Because if if the connection was refused, I'm going to assume, I don't know, the server is completely down. The host is not running at all, so maybe we'll give it some time to get back up. Or maybe I would, in reality, I might want to make this something even longer. Like maybe I want to make it, that's 20 seconds, right? But I don't want to, for the sake of this video, I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to double it to be 6 seconds. For my timeout, I think, let's see, I had my timeout set for 5 seconds. I guess I could leave it there. And then maybe when there's a timeout, I do the same thing. I take this and then I decide, well, okay, eventually I want to go back and try to get my messages again, but maybe this time instead of waiting 6 seconds, I don't have to wait quite as long. Maybe this time I just wait another 5 seconds. Okay, and you know what, let's raise this to 8 seconds. We'll see if we can see a difference. So now if I just go through the whole functionality of what I got here just one time to summarize it to see if it makes sense. Okay, so what happens is when the page loads, initially, this triggers, right? This function will run, set timeout. It'll wait 3 seconds after the page loads before it does anything, and then it will call get messages. So we'll go into this block of code right here. Get messages will run. It will spawn the AJAX request. It will set the timeout for 5 seconds, so it's only going to wait for a response for 5 seconds. That's it, which is actually kind of a short period of time, but so be it. Then we'll listen. If the response comes back, and it has to happen in under 5 seconds, great. Then we will just set another timeout to wait another 3 seconds, and at that point we'll just cycle back around and call ourselves again, and the process will repeat. That's what happens if there is success. And actually I'm going to just put that right in here. So I'm going to say if success, which means we get a response, the response we want, right? A 200 response. That's the code, and which signifies a successful HTTP exchange, a 200 code. Great. Now, another thing that could happen, right, is we could just get an error. So if error, i.e. connection refused, but there are other kinds of errors that can happen, okay? So I'm not, again, I haven't drilled down enough into that event that was sent back to really know how I can identify exactly in here what kind of error it was, and it may actually not be possible. I'm not sure if HTTP specification really allows that much to be known. I'm not sure. All right, so but I can detect an error. All right, and if there is an error, then I'm going to wait for a while before I try to send another get messages, because I'm going to assume that something is really bad with the server. So we won't do anything for 8 seconds. And again, in reality, I really want this to be a lot longer, right? But for testing purposes, we'll leave it at 8. Now, another thing that could happen, right, is if the request hangs, which you saw how I did that. That was basically, yeah, the server is running, but there's a problem with it. It's not sending the response quickly enough, or it's not sending a response at all. It's there, but we can't get a response back from it. So that's a very different kind of thing that's happening. And in that case, we are just going to wait, and we're going to wait 5 seconds, and then we're going to send get messages again. Or we're going to call get messages again. So here I have a way of really controlling it in much more fine detail how these requests get sent to the server. And well, let's run it a couple times and see what happens. All right, so with this saved and this saved, now I don't have a way of doing the timeout unless I actually comment this out. But let's see what happens. Right now, what I should be able to do is I should be able to kind of start and stop the server and see what happens when I play with these, when I let these go. Let me show you what I mean. So server is, let me try to have both windows open at once for you too, so you can see. Actually, all 3 windows open at once. So let's go and put, let's see, we don't need that. Let's put this over here. Let's put this up here. And let's take this, and I may not need this, but it might be nice to have anyway. And we'll put this over here like that, and then we'll shrink the console down like so. Okay. Let's see what happens. So run the server. Here it is. All right, let's refresh the page and we begin. Here we go. Let's watch that network tab. So some requests are going through. Right now I have another browser that's open actually, which I just pulled in from another page or another screen. So let's put some stuff in here. Let's refresh here too. All right, so great. Let's put in foo. Let's send foo. Let's put in hello. Let's send hello. Notice that this guy doesn't, that guy does have it. Let's put in wobble. This one won't get it right away. I just got it. It depends on where in the cycle it's. Let's wait for this guy to update. There we go. Okay, go send. This will take a moment, a couple seconds. There it is. Okay. All right, so it's working. Great. Now, let's go over here and quit the server with Control C. Remember, we're going to lose this array when we do because it's not being stored permanently. So the data will be gone. But let's quit the server. Gone. Okay, so now it's down. Okay, there's our failed error. All right, it has failed. Now we should be waiting 8 seconds at this point because I have 8 seconds down here. Oh, and we waited 8 seconds. It just did another one. Let's count. All right. So it is sending again. It's trying again, but just not as rapidly. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi. There it is. And there's our request. So every 8 seconds, it's going to try again. It's going to get the failure every time, and that's going to be it. Now let's restart the server. Okay, so now the server's running. Okay, watch this. There it is. Look, it came back, right? So now it's going to look every 3 seconds because the server is running. So this is a really big deal because I now have much more foolproof code. I have code that can deal with errors on the server side because the client has no control over what happens to this server. It could go offline at any point in time, but I need to be able to recover. And I don't want to be spawning 1,000 requests, if I'm doing it every second like it was when I first started this video. I don't want to be doing that over and over and over again. If I'm not getting a response from this server at all, let's slow down and wait. But then when the server came back up, lo and behold, the request started picking up to being every 3 seconds, right? And this kind of networking and understanding of networking is crucial when you're dealing with devices that are connected in this way, right? Because think about how many times a device that you use loses communication with a server. I mean, it happens all the time when you're listening to Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming music service that you use when you're driving and you're going through the woods all of a sudden and you have no signal. What happens? Does your app crash, or does it just pause until you have a signal again and then it starts to play the song from where it left off, or at least it plays the next song, right? Or something, however it deals with it. So you have to build into your programs the ability to deal with this instability that's going to happen when two parties are trying to communicate with each other and one of them may be not listening or unable to respond. Let's go ahead and quit this. Again, I just quit the server, so we're going to go back to this state where we're now asking every 8 seconds for an update. And there you go. Okay, this time I'm going to go and I'm going to try to do a timeout. So that's going to be an every 5-second request when that condition happens. So in order to do that, I actually have to go back because I have no way of really simulating a timeout in this environment other than to do that, which is what I've learned that tonight. So let's restart. All right, now it's pending. It's pending. That was my timeout. Cancel. It's going to be about 5 seconds before it tries again. There it is. That was about 5 seconds. Pending, 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 and then canceled. All right, and this will continue until the server is able to respond again. So I just edited that line of code. I'm going to quit the server. I'm going to restart the server. Look, it actually got a request in there while the server was down, and it saw that it was a connection refused. But the server's back up now, and it is responding, so we're back to getting 200s, and we're back to every 3 seconds. All right, so that's that. So I hope, yeah, I learned a lot while making this video, because I didn't anticipate the difference that this would happen, the difference between the error connection refused and the timeout. But what we have here is a much, much more robust version of polling. It can now, the client can now deal dynamically with the different types of situations that might come up when the server can't respond or just totally isn't there. And as I've said before, and I'll stress again, these delay times could be made very different. It probably should be. But in order to do this, we had to go back and get rid of the set interval, which I used before, and we went to a one-off counter, a set timeout, and then we're just recursively calling ourself. The get messages function ultimately calls itself in here, in here, in here with different time delays, depending upon what event actually happens and what gets detected. So that's a better version of polling. To finish it off, what you could do is, and I won't do this because I think at some point it's enough already, right? There are, as I've said, there are other technologies that have evolved that circumvent much of this. Although it's still better to know, I would argue it's still crucial to know this and what's going on at this level. But the last thing that you could do, if you wanted to, would be to write a more robust server that responded differently depending upon whether or not this array had changed. So if there haven't been any added messages into this array, then we might send a very different response, or we might not send any response at all. We might hang it, it would just not send back. In other words, what I'm kind of saying here is you'd put inside of here some kind of if, and I'm not exactly sure how you want to write this, because you'd have to have an algorithm that could check to see that this array actually had new messages in it. But the way to do that would basically just be to count how many things were in here, and then count again, save that number, and then count again at this moment in time. And if they're different from each other, then send the response. If not, don't send the response. Basically just keep the response open, and then the client will just wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, or time out. All right? And then if you did that, that would be worthy of what's being called long polling. That's kind of the de facto way that this was done for a long time. Moving to WebSockets kind of supersedes all of this. If you're interested, I'll try this. If you want to kind of quit the video now, that's perfectly acceptable, but I've got a few minutes myself, so I'll play around, see if I can do this. I hadn't intended to do it, but I guess I could try to see what would happen. So let's see, how could I do this? I need to have some code in here that basically says if messages dot length is greater than, and I need a way of remembering what it was last time. So let's see, let's create a global variable up here. Let's say in our script called var no messages, or num messages. Sometimes you see NO as the abbreviation for number, believe it or not, but probably NUM is a better one. So number messages equals, and we're just going to say messages dot length. And when a post request comes in, I'm going to reset that variable. So I'm going to say num messages equals messages dot length again. So every time we push a new message into the array, then I'll update the variable, this integer variable that's just storing the number of messages that are in there. So that variable is only going to get updated when a post request happens. And then in here, I'm going to say if messages.length is greater than number of messages, then I'm going to send you a response, because that means I've added, there's been another post request and there's one more message in there than there was before. All right. Wait, is that correct? Let me think about this for a second. It should work, right? Let's see. A post request comes in and the number of messages goes up to 7. Let's say it was 6, and now a GET request comes in and it checks the messages and it sees that there are those not always going to be equal to each other though? If messages.length is equal to number of messages, let's say a message has not come in. So those two are the same. This should be easier to figure out. I think I finally figured out how I want to do this. I don't want this here. And I'm actually going to rename this variable to last messages, which is the number of messages that we used to have, or that we had last time. So that's going to be set to 0 initially, because there's not going to be anything in there when the server first starts. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to say if messages.length is greater than or equal to last messages, then I'm going to do two things. I'm going to update my last messages so last messages equals messages dot length, and then I'm going to send the response. Otherwise, I'm not going to do anything. I'll just sit there and let the request hang. Let's see what that does. So, all right, so let's walk through a scenario bit by bit to see what happens. So let's say we start off and there are no messages, right, posted. And so messages.length, the length of the array is 0, and last messages, which really should be last number of messages, but I didn't feel like writing that. So they're both going to be equal to 0, no problem. There's no push at this point. So say everything just stays the length of the array. Messages.length is still 0 because nothing's been pushed into it. So somebody makes a GET request and messages.length is 0. That is not greater than last messages. In fact, they're equal to each other because they're still both 0. So nothing at all happens. So the request hangs. All right, and then we'll deal with that on the client side. Also, at some point, I should then say, well, it's time to send something eventually when something changes in here, when the array gets bigger, but we'll deal with that later. That's another problem. Now, eventually, if a post request does end up going through, then this won't get updated. Last messages will still be 0, because this only runs once when the server first loads. But the messages array will now have a length of 1. So this will be bigger. So 1 will be bigger than 0. And then we will update the last number of messages, or last messages to equal messages.length, and then we'll send, and that will close that particular response, or that exchange. So that means that we should time out until we send until somebody makes a post. Let's see what happens. All right, so it's not quite there yet, but so let me quit this and refresh. And again, I'm just exploring here, so feel free. The official content ended 10 minutes ago, but let's see what happens. It's the guerrilla coding here, right on the fly. I'm watching. Okay, it canceled. It canceled that request. We should be on a 5-second timer now, with timeouts happening in the browser, and it seems to be about right. So every 5 seconds we send off a request, because I have a timeout of 5 seconds, and I also wait 5 seconds to send the next one when the timeout happens. Okay, and so we clearly, that seems to be working. So now I'm going to actually send something, and I can do it from any client. It doesn't have to be this particular client, but I don't see why it can't be. So let me make a post request. Let's put in foo. All right. So this time it said foo. Oh, you know what? Yep, there we go. Yep. All right. You know what? This is going to be just a little confusing because I'm actually sending back the response when you post as well, and I think I'm going to clean that up. So we can respond, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Let's see. Well, you know what? Let's just say response.send nothing. We won't send any body whatsoever when that happens. All right, so let's refresh let's save this. Let's restart the server. Let's go. Here we go. All right, back to the client. So let's refresh. All right, so 3 seconds. The first request goes out. It's going to hang because nothing's been sent. All right, canceled. All right, now I'm actually going to go use another client. I think that'll make this a little clearer. All right, cancel, cancel, cancel. This time we're going to send foo here. All right, nothing happens in that one. Okay, there we go. Okay, now we're on every 3 seconds. Well, we're not though, because only one came back, and that's right, as it should be, because nothing has changed. All right, so we're back to timeouts every 5 seconds, and then a 5-second wait to send the next request. Okay, this time this client is going to send bar. Let's wait. That's pending. That's going to cancel because I didn't get the request in on time. And now, oh. That one never updated. Maybe I didn't send it. Let's see. Oh yeah. Well. How big is the array? Foo bar bar. Bat. That one came back. That's okay. It got everything. Wibble. Let's see when that comes back. Wibble. Wobble. Pending. It's funny, there's a timing thing here where sometimes it doesn't end up working. It just keeps on hanging. Wobble. That one came back okay. I'm not sure why. Okay, let me quit the server. Well, that's something of an approach to it, but there's still some issues with that. I don't like the way that it sometimes does not update like it should. I'm not sure what's happening, but obviously this is failing for some reason sometimes with the post request. the message. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I'd have to keep thinking about that. But then the last thing to do would be to say, well, how do I make it so that if we're in the middle of a hanging request, then the server can suddenly decide to respond if in fact there is an update. What shall I do here? So I'm just thinking out loud. Usually when I make these videos, I try stuff first and then, know a little bit more about what I'm doing, but what the heck. Let's try some things here. All right. Well, I took a minute and I figured out what was going on. And it turns out this is going to be harder to implement than I thought. But let me just show you quickly what the deal is. So the conflict is that I have two clients communicating with the server at the same time. If you haven't figured that out already, maybe some of you realized what was going on. So because I'm using one variable here in my server, what's happening is that both clients, because I had two windows open, were both sending requests. And one client was basically causing this to be reset. And so when the next client came looking, it was automatically encountering a situation where messages.length was equal to last messages again. So this client over here was never able to get the update. Let me show you how it works with one client, and I think it'll make more sense. So I want to do one other thing too. In the post request, my JavaScript, I want to, let's see, that's over here. I actually don't want to update anything. I don't want to do anything there. Because what's happening is that's causing this array to disappear every time I click send, because the server isn't sending back the array anymore. It's just sending back an empty response, and so this was disappearing. All right, so the server's running. Here, let's restart it. The server's running. There's nothing in there. Let's refresh this page. Okay, so we're at a situation where we're pending and we're timing out every 5 seconds, and then we're waiting 5 seconds again to send the next request. All right, so there you go. All right, now I'm going to put in foo. Nothing here yet. Nothing here yet. Okay, but this time you're going to see it appear. All right, now again, we'll fall back to a situation where we're going to be timing out every 5 seconds. Nothing. This time we'll send bar. Nothing yet. Nothing yet. Nothing yet. And there it is. Okay, so this certainly works. But now the thing is, if I have another client that's doing the same thing, then with a second client that's firing off these GET requests to this route, one client will change the value of this variable prematurely when the other client needs for it to not change. Because once these two things become equal to each other, a client can't get a message anymore, or can't get an update. And so that's what was happening before when I was using the two different clients, which kind of leads me to the realization that it's going to be really hard to implement this full-fledged long polling trick unless if we don't keep track of clients. In other words, each client needs to have some type of memory here in the server so that the server can specifically say, does that client have all the messages, and then can update when necessary. But we can't, and I should have realized this before, we can't just get away with a single variable at the global level here inside the server function, because the clients are going to step on each other and prevent each other from ever getting the updates. So, so I'm trying to think of a way to make that happen without uniquely identifying clients, and I don't think that I can. I'm going to actually have to keep track of each one when the request comes in to this route. I'm going to have to take a look at who sent it and then compare it to my list of clients. I'll have to have an array and just keep pushing clients into it every time they connect, and then I can they sort of have individual variables to control for each one. And that's just going to get really complicated really quickly. All right. And I haven't even implemented this idea where a request should be able to be sent back in the middle of one of these long polls when the server is just kind of waiting to respond. I would probably want to come in here and do some kind of set interval, right? I want to maybe, and then put all of this inside of that and say every couple of seconds, or even faster, every 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, check to see if in fact the array had been made longer than this particular client knows it to be. And then I could clear first I could send the response back to the client, and then I could clear the interval. So it's probably not worth trying to do with the two clients, but I guess I could try it with one and see what happens. It might work with one. Let's see what it does. So what I want to do is, okay, I want to get rid of that. I want to say function, like so, and this is my function, like so, comma 500, because that's my, so I'm going to do it every half a second. That's what that'll end up being. And that will, let's see, that will end my set interval function. So I'll send the response if the messages.length is greater than last messages. Yeah. And then I will, I'll reset the last messages to be the same as that. I'll send it off. And then inside here, let's see. I want to make sure I have to clear this interval because I don't want the interval to just keep going forever and ever. I don't want to keep a timer going when I don't need to. So I have to find the right place to do that. And I don't think, so I think I'm missing a parentheses. Let's see. So that ends that if. And let's see. Set interval function. If messages ends that. That's 500. Yeah, something's wrong. Let's see, that's just, yeah, okay, that's the end of my if statement. But then I still need to go like this and say 500. And then there's got to be an appropriate place to cancel the interval so it doesn't go forever. So I'm going to put that right over. I said I want to do it out here. I think I have to do it in the if. So there's a clear interval, and then what I would have to do is actually give this a name. So say var intv equals that, and then I can say, because I have to be able to refer to it, intv like that. So the interval will keep going. Which is bad, I guess, because eventually it has to clear no matter what after some amount of time. Set timeout function clear interval intv, and let's see, we want that to happen after, let's clear the interval after, if nothing happens after 6 seconds, so we don't just keep the thing going. All right, so request comes in, we start an interval timer. It repeatedly checks every half a second. It runs this code every half a second to see if messages.length is greater than last messages. And if not, it doesn't do any of this stuff. It just comes back and checks half a second later. If in fact it is greater, then it will reset this. It will send a response back to the client. It'll send the messages back. It will then clear the interval. That will just keep happening. Also, we'll set a timeout, and that function will clear the interval after 6 seconds in case nothing happens. We don't want the interval continuously running. Let's see if this works. Okay, well, it ran without any problems. So all right. So okay, the request came in. That should have started an interval timer. I guess I could have put some print in here to see it. It's canceled. And probably the interval has been canceled there as well. All right, now if I come here and I type in foo and I hit send, I got foo. And now I should, well, maybe it does work. Nothing happens. All right, let's try a bar. And I want to send this right in the middle of a pending request. It worked. Okay, bah. Let's wait for the request to pend and hang. Okay, so we got to wait a couple seconds. The request is going to hang. Pending. And it works. Excellent. And then it cancels the timer. All right, let's go back and do some printouts of these timers to see what's going on. So as long as the interval is going, I'm going to print something so we can see it going. Yeah. Let's just do that right up here. Let's do a console.log. Timer, well, let's just say checking for message updates. Or message update. All right. So, yeah. Let's quit. Let's refresh or restart. My bad. Let's go over here. Let's refresh. Okay, so nothing yet. 3 seconds. We fire off the GET request. Oh, look at that. Every half a second it says checking for message update. That's the server now. And then it stopped after 6 seconds. So that timer is over. Now it's going to start again. And here's the server checking for an update, for an update, for an update, nothing. And then it stopped after 6 seconds. Okay, and that's because I have this clear interval. Again, I just don't want the timer running forever for no reason at all. But I think it's still actually going, but you just can't see it scrolling. Let's see, let's make the console window bigger. Yeah, it's definitely still adding. Okay, now let's put something in. Let's say foo. Okay, there it is. Got it. Checking for message update. And now we're just going to keep checking. Okay, let's send bar. I got to come up with some new words. Oh, what happened? There's a delay. I'm not sure why. Oh, maybe because I'm sending these in between the requests. That's what's happening. So if I have to send it when a request is pending, and then I get a quick update. But like if I send it when there's no request pending, nothing's going to happen. Let's see. Hi. Here, go. It takes a while. Bye. Bye went quickly. Pizza. Pizza went quickly. Food. Food. Now it's updating quickly.
Have a minute?
All right, so it does seem to be working here. I'm not sure why that little lag is happening. There. Send. There. Right. I wonder if the console log, now that we've kind of convinced ourselves that it works, I wonder if the console.log is making things problematic. Here, let's reset the server. We won't see that log anymore. Let's redo this. All right, so we have pending request coming up. Pending request. Send. Foo, right away. Bar. Right away. Bat. Right away. Now remember, here, right away. There. It appears to be the printing that was the problem. Everywhere. Now, if we send a post request when the get is not firing, let's see, the JavaScript only fires the, let's see, on a successful load, which is happening, we still wait 3 seconds before we ask for anything again. So even when we get something back, there is going to be a bit of a delay. But it's quick. Hi. Bye. All right, and then now we'll just wait. And now we'll just pending down here, waiting, and it's just canceled. Okay, and my timer was stopped on the server. And we started another one. This time we'll respond and see, there it is. It's working. So that's an example of what we call long polling. I'm not sure, because I've actually never written long polling for real, so I'm not sure if that's the easiest way to do it. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure there's better ways to. Express probably has some functionality built in to make this happen. I know this got a little confusing with the intervals here. Yeah, but that's essentially what it is. Now, as I said, this only works for one client. And again, that's because I'm hinging everything on this variable here, which can ultimately be affected by any client. So if client number 2 decides to do a check and it gets the updated message list because it's the first one to realize that this is greater than that, and then it's going to reset this, then unfortunately the other client is never going to have the opportunity to get that. So in order to make this happen, the server is actually going to have to start caching or remembering or storing a reference to in some way each client that connected, and then handling things on a per client basis if you really wanted to do that. All right, so so again, many of you probably haven't even gotten to this part in the video, but if you were interested and you wanted to watch to the end and just see how this goes, I've never done this before, so you just got a chance to see me kind of just explore and just try to figure something out for myself for the first time. All right. Thanks for watching.